Book Two, Chapter 4 of the Lancashire Witches. This recording is in the public domain. Reading by Andy Minter. The Lancashire Witches, a Romance of Pendle Forest, by William Harrison Ainsworth. Book 2, Pendle Forest. Chapter 4 The Reeve of the Forest. The surprise of the party was by no means diminished when the stranger spoke. His voice exactly resembled the sharp, cracked tone of the attorney. "I crave pardon for the freedom I have taken in stopping you, good masters," he said, doffing his cap and saluting them respectfully; "but being aware of your errand, I am come to attend you on it."
"And who are you, fellow, who thus volunteer your services?"
demanded Roger Nowell, sharply. "I am one of the Reeves of the Forest of Blackburnshire, worshipful sir," replied the stranger, "and as such my presence at the intended perambulation of the boundaries of her property has been deemed necessary by Mrs. Nutter, as I shall have to make representation of the matter at the next court of Swainmote."
"Indeed!" exclaimed Nowell. "But how knew you we were coming?"
"Mistress Nutter sent me word last night," replied the Reeve, "that Master Nicholas Assheton and certain other gentlemen would come to Rough Lee for the purpose of ascertaining the marks, meres, and boundaries of her property, early this morning, and desired my attendance on the occasion. Accordingly, I stationed myself on yon high ground to look out for you, and have been on the watch for more than an hour."
"Humph!" exclaimed Roger Nowell. "And you live in the forest?"
"I live at Barrowford, worshipful sir," replied the Reeve, "but I have only lately come there, having succeeded Maurice Mottisfont, the other Reeve, who has been removed by the master forester to Rossendale, where I formerly dwelt."
"That may account for my not having seen you before," rejoined Nowell. "You are well mounted, sirrah. I did not know that Master Forester allowed his men such horses as the one you ride." "This horse does not belong to me, sir," replied the Reeve. "It has been lent me by Mistress Nutter." "Ah! I see how it is now," cried Nowell. "You are suborned to give false testimony, knave. I object to his attendance, Master Nicholas." "Nay, I think you do the man injustice," said the squire. "He speaks frankly and fairly enough, and seems to know his business. The worst that can be said against him is that he resembles somewhat too closely our little legal friend there. That, however, ought to be no objection to you, Master Nowell, but rather the contrary." "Well, take the responsibility of the matter upon your own shoulders," said Nowell. "If any ill comes of it, I shall blame you." "Be it so," replied the squire. "My shoulders are broad enough to bear the burthen. You may ride with us, Master Reeve." "May I inquire your name, friend?" said Potts, as the stranger fell back to the rear of the party. "Thomas Potts, at your service, sir," replied the Reeve. "What, Thomas Potts!" exclaimed the astonished attorney. "That is my name, sir," replied the Reeve, quietly. "Why, zounds!" exclaimed Nicholas, who overheard the reply. "You do not mean to say your name is Thomas Potts? This is more wonderful still. You must be this gentleman's twin brother." "The gentleman certainly seems to resemble me very strongly," replied the Reeve, apparently surprised in his turn. "Is he of these parts?" "No, I am not," returned Potts, angrily. "I am from London, where I reside in Chancery Lane, and practise the law, though I likewise attend as clerk of the court at the assizes at Lancaster, where I may possibly, one of these days, have the pleasure of seeing you, my pretended namesake." "Possibly, sir," said the Reeve, with provoking calmness. "I myself am from Chester, and, like yourself, was brought up to the law; but I abandoned my profession, or rather it abandoned me, for I had few clients, so I took to an honester calling, and became a forester, as you see. My father was a draper in the city I have mentioned, and dwelt in Watergate Street. His name was Peter Potts." "Peter Potts your father!" exclaimed the attorney, in the last state of astonishment. "Why, he was mine. But I am his only son." "Up to this moment I conceived myself an only son," said the Reeve; "but it seems I was mistaken, since I find I have an elder brother." "Elder brother!" exclaimed Potts, wrathfully. "You are older than I by 20 years. But it is all a fabrication. I deny the relationship entirely." "You cannot make me other than the son of my father," said the Reeve, with a smile. "Well, Master Potts," interposed Nicholas, laughing, I see no reason why you should be ashamed of your brother. There is a strong family likeness between you. So Peter Potts, the draper of Chester, was your father, eh? I was not aware of the circumstances before." "And but for this intrusive fellow, you would never have become aware of it," muttered the attorney. "Give ear to me, squire," he said, urging Flint close up to the other's side, and speaking in a low tone. "I do not like that fellow's looks at all." "I am surprised at that," rejoined the squire, "for he exactly resembles you." "That is why I do not like him," said Potts. "I believe him to be a wizard." "You are no wizard to think so," rejoined the squire, and he rode on to join Roger Nowell, who was a little in advance. "I will try him on the subject of witchcraft," thought Potts. "As you dwell in the forest," he said to the reeve, "you have no doubt seen those two terrible beings, Mothers Demdike and Chattox." "Frequently," replied the reeve; "but I would rather not talk about them in their own territories. You may judge of their power by the appearance of the village you have just quitted. The inhabitants of that unlucky place refused them their customary tributes, and have therefore incurred their resentment. You will meet other instances of the like kind before you have gone far." "I am glad of it, for I want to collect as many cases as I can of witchcraft," observed Potts. "They will be of little use to you," observed the reeve. "How so?" inquired Potts. "Because, if the witches discover what you are about, as they will not fail to do, you will never leave the forest alive," returned the other. "You think not?" cried Potts. "I am sure of it," replied the reeve. "I will not be deterred from the performance of my duty," said Potts. "I defy the devil and all his works." "You may have reason to repent your temerity," replied the reeve. And anxious apparently to avoid further conversation on the subject, he drew in the rein for a moment, and allowed the attorney to pass on. Notwithstanding his boasting, Master Potts was not without much secret misgiving, but his constitutional obstinacy made him determine to prosecute his plans at any risk, and he comforted himself by recalling the opinion of his sovereign authority on such matters. "Let me ponder over the exact words of our British Solomon," he thought. "I have his learned treatise by heart, and it is fortunate my memory serves me so well, for the sagacious prince's dictum will fortify me in my resolution, which has been somewhat shaken by this fellow, whom I believe to be no better than he should be. For all he calls himself my father's son, and hath assumed my likeness, doubtless for some mischievous purpose. If the magistrate, saith the king, be slothful towards witches, God is very able to make them instruments to waken and punish his sloth. No one can accuse me of slothfulness and want of zeal. My best exertions have been used against the accursed creatures. And now for the rest. But if, on the contrary, he be diligent in examining and punishing them, God will not permit their master to trouble or hinder so good a work. Exactly what I have done. I am quite easy now, and shall go on fearlessly as before. I am one of the lawful lieutenants described by the king, and cannot be defrauded or deprived of my office." As these thoughts passed through the attorney's mind, a low derisive laugh sounded in his ears, and connecting it with the reeve, he looked back, and found the object of his suspicions gazing at him, and chuckling maliciously. So fiendishly malignant, indeed, was the gaze fixed upon him, that Potts was glad to turn his head away to avoid it. "I am confirmed in my suspicions," he thought. "He is evidently a wizard, if he be not." Again the mocking laugh sounded in his ears, but he did not venture to look round this time, being fearful of once more encountering the terrible gaze. Meanwhile the party had traversed the valley, and, to avoid a dangerous morass stretching across its lower extremity, and shorten the distance, for the ordinary road would have led them too much to the right, they began to climb one of the ridges of Pendle Hill, which lay between them and the vale they wished to gain. On obtaining the top of this eminence, an extensive view on either side opened upon them. Behind was the sterile valley they had just crossed, its black soil, hoary grass, and heathy wastes, only enlivened at one end by patches of bright sulphur coloured moss, which masked a treacherous quagmire lurking beneath it. Some of the cottages in Sabden were visible, and from the sad circumstances connected with them, and which oppressed the thoughts of the beholders, added